Kill la Kill, the game, IF, has officially announced that they're going to be launching with 10 playable characters, along with 2 free DLC characters. This caused a mixed reaction among fans, because on one hand, one of the free DLC characters is Marco. On the other hand, the base roster is 10 characters, and 2 of them are clone characters. Well, not clone characters, but characters that share the same name as other characters. They're functionally different, but there's 2 Ryokos and there's 2 Satskis. And a lot of people are complaining about it. And it's not the only game as of recent that has failed to meet the bar that the fans have set. Kill la Kill IF is launching with 10 characters, Power Rangers Battle for the Grid is launching with 9. Even Mortal Kombat 11, which is launching with 25 characters, got a lot of backlash from fans for having too small of a roster. But I'm here to offer a possible counterpoint. Firstly, and I do think this is far more important than people are giving it credit for, stop raising the expectations. Each developer only has so many resources. Character design is one of the more resource-draining things you can do in game development, especially in fighting games. Developers can't offer a story mode, extra modes, interesting gameplay, competitive gameplay, good netcode, and a large roster that offers variety in gameplay with each character. It's just too much to ask for all at once. So if you want to complain about the full roster size of Kill la Kill IF or Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, you have to sacrifice something. You may wonder why you can't just request more characters, and you can, but you have to recognize that if they're going to add those characters, they need to sacrifice something. They can't just generate development time or budget. Something has to go to allow for that extra development time. Each of those games offer interesting gameplay, extra game modes, story mode, and competitive gameplay. Are you willing to sacrifice any of those things for a larger roster? Now, some people will probably point to Injustice 2 or even Mortal Kombat as a counterpoint, because NetherRealm is one of the only fighting game developers in the world who manages to put together good quality versions of all of these things in one game. Good story mode, good netcode, good gameplay, a large roster, although keep in mind that people are still complaining about the 25 character roster of Mortal Kombat 11, and each of those characters all have unique fighting styles. I'm not saying that fighting games can get away with any roster size that they want, because of course one character fighting games would be incredibly boring. There's obviously a bar that needs to be set, that developers need to be able to pass. The question is, what is a fair bar? What is the bare minimum amount of characters that you should expect in a fighting game? First of all, I do think thinking about the series itself is important. In the case of Kill la Kill, it's being developed off of an anime that has a relatively small history of only 24 episodes. So really, there's only about 20 characters or so that you would want in Kill la Kill IF. But really, you could cut that number down to around 6 characters that you absolutely must have on the roster. Maybe even less than that. And with Mortal Kombat, you've got a similar thing going on. You've got around 50-ish characters in the running, but around 5 or 10 that absolutely have to be there. With Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, you've got, I don't know, like 1 million characters that are in the running, but honestly, only like 3 that have to be there. That's not to say that 3 is a minimum bar that developers have to set, because there are other fields that need to be covered. For example, character archetypes. With a roster as small as 3 characters, you would be able to get a cookie-cutter basic character that can do most things, your jack of all trades, your Ryus, etc. You can get in a rushdown character and a grappler, but there's a lot of missing stuff there. What about a zoning character? What about a heavy 50-50 character, a mix-up character? What about a trap character? I think the absolute lowest number of characters for a modern fighting game should be about 6. And to be clear, if a company like NetherRealm or a company like Capcom put out a 6-character roster, or heck, even a 10-character roster, I think that would be pretty insulting, but that would be insulting because of the size of the company and the budget they have available to them, not because of the roster size. I think it's important to put that in perspective. If you've already checked all the boxes for archetypes, you've already checked a rushdown, a grappler, etc., is there much need for multiple versions of those archetypes? After all, most people end up only maining 1 or maybe even 2 characters. The only reason for additional characters on top of that is to add characters that people want to see, and slight variations in gameplay that would be slightly preferential for the people who play those archetypes. It's worth noting that there is a very specific problem happening in games with large rosters. It's making the large majority of the roster unplayable just because of how good the other characters are on the roster. You could argue that's slightly because of balancing, but I would argue it's just because of how many characters you have. When you have so many characters that meet the same archetype category as each other, the question will always be, why would I play this zoning character over this zoning character? The answer is, one's better and one's worse. But why would I ever play the worst one? Now, there are design methods to get around something like that, like interesting tech options or counterplay, but at the end of the day, these are solutions to the problem of having a large roster. So there's even arguments to be had against large rosters, even if you assume you have a big budget. And when I say 6 is the absolute lowest, no matter what your budget is, no matter what the scenario, I think 6 is the bare minimum. In the case of Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, I was able to ignore 9 characters, even though I thought it was really low, because I'm fully aware that they intend to develop the game for a long period of time. Based on the things that they've said publicly, it sounds like they're doing at least 2 seasons of DLC, which should give us around 15 characters, which I'm pretty happy with. With Kill la Kill If, we're assuming we're going to end up with around 18 characters after DLC because of the character select screen, and I'm pretty happy with that as well. Think about this for a second. The overwhelming consensus on Power Rangers Battle for the Grid was that the roster was too small at 9 characters. The consensus on Kill la Kill was that it was too small at 10 characters. Battle for the Grid, too small at 20, Mortal Kombat 11, 25, Jump Force, too small at 40 characters, and heck, even the overwhelming consensus on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was there wasn't enough newcomers. And that roster has 69 playable characters. That's not even counting Echo Fighters, which I think gets you up to 74 off the top of my head. My point is, it just seems like people look at the raw number, or they look at the fact that their favorite character isn't there, and they just start complaining, which I am a little bit sad about, because I'm inclined to agree. When I don't get characters that I want to complain as well. But the important thing is perspective. If you're looking at a developer with a smaller budget, or you're looking at a developer with less time, it's understandable that they're only going to end up with 10 characters, or they're only going to end up with 9 characters, or they're only going to end up with 13, or even 8, or whatever. Perspective is so important. Again, this would be different if we were talking about NetherRealm, or we were talking about Capcom. And even with that perspective, there is a way to complain about the roster. If you look at Power Rangers Battle for the Grid and you're fully aware that it's being developed by a fairly small developer, developing their first ever console game, or if you look at Kill la Kill If and you say that isn't enough characters, even given the developer, well then you have to recognize that there are other sacrifices you would have to make to get a larger roster. You might have to sacrifice story mode, you might have to sacrifice competitive gameplay, you might have to sacrifice quality of gameplay, you might have to sacrifice extra modes like an endless mode or survival mode, because these things all take development time. And it's not a small amount of development time either. With all of that said, I do think it's important for the developers to also have a little bit of perspective. I try my hardest to understand the developer's perspective, but I also think it's their job to understand our perspective as well. Developers, and more specifically publishers, because I think they're the type of people who would make this decision, need to be more vocal, and they need to be able to communicate better with their communities. If Jump Force said from the beginning, we're going to have 40 playable characters, or Power Rangers Battle for the Grid said we're going to have 9 playable characters, these games would have been better received. With Jump Force, with Kill la Kill, and Battle for the Grid, we didn't know the roster size, not until the final characters were revealed. So when you finally do announce the final characters, it comes off as, that's it. That's all we've got to show you, and that's all we have to offer. But if from the beginning you tell people there are 40 characters coming to the game, or there are 9 characters coming to the game, when they get to that final announcement, it's much easier to digest that information. Imagine if we knew that Jotaro and Dio were the final characters in Jump Force. If we had 2 character slots left, we were at 38 characters, and we knew that there were 40 characters in the final roster, and we were going into that final reveal event, and we got Jotaro and Dio, that would have been exciting. The same can be said for Kill la Kill, the same can be said for Battle for the Grid, and so on. Communication, more specifically about roster size, I think is very important. Mortal Kombat 11 and NetherRealm have been telling you from the get-go that that game is going to launch with 25 characters, and it has been so much better. I know I talked about how that game is receiving flack for its small roster, but you know when they received that flack? It was all the way back in their reveal event. Do you know how much more information's come out about the game? People have forgotten all about the roster size. It's come up again recently because there's a leak saying that there's going to be 4 unlockable characters. Well, 3 unlockable characters, but a 4th one being Shao Kahn, the pre-order bonus. At this point, I'm rambling, but my point is, Please understand developers, but developers, you need to understand us as well. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you think about the much smaller rosters than we're used to popping up. Again, I'm okay with it, but my final take would be that I would much prefer them to cut things like story mode, because I don't care about story mode. I know a lot of people do, but it's just not for me. Cut story mode and give me more characters. That's what I want. All right, my name has been Bilbzy, and I'll see you in the next video.